Welcome to today's webinar on mainframe report migration. I am Dustin Freund, one of the co-founders of VirtualZ, and today I have Vince Ray, our co-founder and CTO of VirtualZ Computing. Take a quick look at our agenda here, and then we'll dive right into our topic. So we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges of legacy mainframe reporting, understanding kind of the patterns of mainframe report migration, some considerations, and the architecture and VirtualZ solution around this. And then we'll have a little time for a Q&A, and then we'll conclude with a couple other announcements. So anyone that's had experience in the mainframe world in the last, decade or even longer than that will know some of the challenges that exist, particularly around the skills crunch in the mainframe space. And so when you have legacy reporting platforms on your mainframe, those take resources of your core mainframe teams. Not that those are not important, but when there's other options in the market, it's a consideration for any mainframe customer out there. And so related to that is the limited agility issue with that. Some of those traditional tools take a lot of setup and programming, and again, back to your mainframe resources and skills to maintain and use those tools and get the output that you're looking for. In addition to that, legacy mainframe data movement can be really expensive. We typically see 20 to 30% on the average customer, and we've had several customers that have expressed even something higher, towards the 40% of all their mainframe capacity is going towards reporting, moving data, transforming data. So that's another important consideration or challenge that we see in the marketplace. And then obviously disaggregation around if you have a bunch of reporting and analysis and business intelligence on one platform, but your mainframe reporting is all on another platform, that can be very difficult to have the right insights, consolidate reporting. And so how do you bring those things together in a more easy fashion? And then if you are in a migration pattern, the migration can be fairly complex when you're going from some of those legacy tools. You could have hundreds, if not thousands, of reports set up, and how do you get those into a more modern platform? So let's talk a little bit about the two patterns that we see. So one is just as simple as getting your mainframe data out and consolidated into the main corporate or BI AI reporting platform. And so how do you do that in a more efficient fashion? And we'll talk a little bit about that pattern. In fact, that'll probably be our primary focus. And then there's the second pattern where you're actually migrating reports from a legacy reporting platform. And that may take a little bit more work. And we'll talk a little bit about the partners that we have that can help solve that in a very efficient and streamlined fashion as well, on top of the data sharing and data integration piece. As we kind of mentioned, right, you want to be really agile in how you get that data out, and limit the mainframe skills, empower your other teams that are tasked with AI, BI reporting, and be able to really self-service that. And so that's one of the things we'll talk a little bit about, is how do you get that data into the platforms that your overall enterprise teams are using. Scalability, back to the resources that it takes from the legacy mainframe standpoint, either moving data or actually doing the reporting in the mainframe space. That can take up a lot of your capacity. And so that may be a consideration, is, one, moving that data in a more efficient fashion, or how do you want to recapture some of that capacity into, application workloads, other batch workloads that are not necessarily around reporting. And then seamless data integration is, how do you get that data out efficiently, no code, Doesn't take a lot of mainframe skills or resources. You're not maintaining complex ETL or even change data capture routines. And so that's something that we will help with and figure out. And then cost savings too. There's some distinct advantages that we've really gone after in this space on top of the, you know, on top of the other things we were talking about. So Vince, I'm going to pick your brain here a little bit about just some of the considerations around um, report migration, and then how do the VirtualZ technologies really address that in our solutions to make that easier for customers?
Yeah, no, happy to go into that. I mean, what's at the core of this problem is that many times what you're dealing with are mainframe data sets that are just very complicated and non-standard. Things like VSAM files that are very hard for really any application, but specifically reporting and BI tools to understand. Once you get away from the mainframe. So a lot of our focus is really about that. How do we get that data into a form that it's easily consumed by really whatever tool you want. That could be I don't know, a custom application, that could be a reporting tool, that could be anything. So one of the things there is that there are a lot of different targets you might want to put that data in. Might be and you see some of these on the slide. It might be that you want to get that data into something like Snowflake or a more traditional relational database, Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server, or whatever it is. And there's no right and wrong answer here. Different organizations will do different things. And even within a single organization, you might have, lots of different databases that are optimized for different applications. So, we start from the assumption that, whatever we do should support, wherever you want to go with your data. So, we do that by standardizing on, for instance, JDBC technology. There are about 100 supported databases that we can target, and and it's a little of everything. It's traditional relational databases. It's more modern things like Snowflake or Databricks. It's NoSQL databases, Mongo, or really just about anything that you could imagine can be the target of your data. But we also, understand that data that you're dealing with that might start out in, let's say, a VSAM file is itself really complicated. Those records might be, the easy case is it might be text. They might be EBCDIC that needs to be converted to, ASCII or UTF-8 or Unicode, or, whatever it happens to be. But, in most complex applications, more than text, there's other things in those files like, packed decimal fields or floating point numbers stored in mainframe style floating point, or, just pure binary data that needs to be thought about. So, one of the things that we've developed at VirtualZ is a transformation engine where we can take a description of your records, which is usually nothing more than a COBOL copybook that says, here's what my data looks like. And then we can use that to transform those records really into whatever form you want. If you're going to a database, well, those are going to be columns. That allows us to split the record into columns based on data type, and you see them that way. You don't have to worry about, I don't know, this latitude field was a mainframe floating point number. What do I do with it? It shows up in your target database as a floating point number in whatever syntax the database wants to use. Um, if you're not going to a database, it also supports things like, I want to see those records in, let's say a JSON form or an XML form or a CSV form. So again, whatever you're doing with the data, whether it's going into another application or a BI tool or an AI model or whatever it is, it's easy to get the data in the format you need it. And that's a really really big benefit of what we're talking about. Dusty mentioned the work that customers go through to implement these things. Well, that's where a lot of it is. How do I take apart this really complicated record that's got all of these binary fields and all this other complexity? How do I turn that into something that's going to be understandable by a non-mainframe reporting tool? We do that in a no code way where you just tell us what your data looks like, and we handle the rest. Another issue I'll mention is, often when you're dealing with mainframe applications, there's a lot of data involved. Some of these files that we're talking about could be enormous. And if you think about where a lot of your capacity goes, if I'm thinking about reporting on a, multi-terabyte file, I may have to move that entire file somewhere else, transform it as I've described so far. Now I can run my whatever reports against it. I mean, that takes an enormous amount of time just to move that data around. So one of the other things we do is we allow you to deal with subsets of the data. If you want to do something like, I don't know, I have this transaction log and I processed it an hour ago, just give me the records that have been added in the last hour. Absolutely, we can do that sort of thing too. So instead of moving terabytes, you're moving, much smaller amounts of data. And then, really what we're talking about performance, I mean, the throughput is really important here. A lot of the competing technologies we've seen use things like web type transactions, and there's nothing really wrong with that, except the underlying protocols are not really optimized for moving massive amounts of data around. They're very often text oriented protocols. They're designed for, here's a transaction and here's a response, not for streaming large amounts of data. So we make sure that we use things like, I mentioned JDBC. It's optimized for what's the best possible way to get data into target database. And just to put some numbers to it, even in our test environment, and mind you, our test environment is the smallest mainframe you could possibly imagine. It actually sits next to my desk here in my office. So, we're talking a tiny mainframe with nothing more than consumer grade internet to access a database in the cloud. And even in that configuration, we're able to do somewhere around 6 to 20,000 records per second, depending on how big and how complicated the records are. We imagine that real high-end mainframe with high-end network connections would be able to do many times more throughput than that, than anything that we're able to see there. So now what might have taken you, I don't know, maybe hours to move data back and forth, now you could probably do it minutes because of that. And maybe best of all, and Dusty touched on this too, a lot of the processing that you're using today on your mainframe to do these kind of tasks drives, I like to talk about it as it spins the software meter. In other words, it's making all of your mainframe software more expensive, at least to the extent that you're doing subcapacity licensing for any of your vendor products. With our solutions, we are careful to make everything we can zip eligible. So all of that work that we're doing to transform the records and move them across the network and all of that, it doesn't affect your software bills. It runs on a zip processor, very low cost, and has no impact on the rest of your software environment that way. So a lot of advantages this way. And again, everybody's needs are going to be a little bit different. There's a big difference between if I have, I don't know, need to put a report on my manager's desk showing last week's sales activity, that's one thing. But if your definition of reports is, I'm a cellular provider and I'm looking to generate printed bills that I'm going to send to 5 million customers. I mean, that's a different kind of reporting. It's still reporting ultimately, and a lot of these factors are important for all of the things that we're talking about. You just might approach it a little differently. So yeah, I mean, the other point I'll make too is that uh, the inputs and outputs with our product are open-ended. I mean, we talk about files and it usually is the case that those are the hard ones to solve for you. I have a VSAM file or I have a, whatever it is. But we also have ways where we can allow you to process just about any type of data you might have on your mainframe. So, again, very flexible, very open-ended, very easy, and very efficient. And that's what we focused on. So Dusty, anything I missed or that we should talk about while we're here?
Yeah, so Vince, thank you for addressing that last. That was one of the questions we had was someone was asking about DB2 to actually Snowflake. And I think you just addressed that's something that we can do with the open architecture, even though we're talking a lot about files here. How do you deal with the access to the files from a data integrity standpoint? Is that an issue? Does it lock up the file when Propels is accessing it? How does that work?
Yeah, so a couple of things here. Certainly, Propels is honors your existing ZOS security policies and so forth. So yeah, if a user doesn't have access to a particular file, he's not going to get access just by running our Propel's product. So, all of the controls that you have in place continue to be enforced by Propels. There's no change in, what users can get to or can't get to. If you could get to it without Propels by, running an application on the mainframe, you'll still be able to get to it. If you don't have access, you don't get to it. The integrity really, when we're talking about like sharing files and so forth, the answer really is that Propels is a well-behaved mainframe application, so it behaves like any other mainframe application. What that really gets to is it's a function of the type of file, how it's been defined, and what you're sharing it with. If you have something like, I'll just keep using VSAM as the example. If you have a VSAM file that's shared with a CICS region and it's based on, let's say VSAM RLS, record level sharing, then absolutely you can run Propels concurrently with, all of your transactions running, and Propels does the right thing there. There are other cases, for instance, if you're dealing with a sequential file and you want to guarantee that it can't be modified while you're processing it with Propels, I mean, that's easily done too. Things like, disposition in JCL and, some of the other basic controls that are available on ZOS give you, control over really all of that. In most of the cases with Propels, what we're doing is this is a read operation to the mainframe that definitely simplifies things. If you do require real-time, not just read access but update access, that would be our Lozen product. And Lozen does what I'm describing. It does real-time read and write access, and in that case, again, it's the same idea. It really just depends on the type of object being looked at. Is it BSAM? Is it QSAM? Is it what is it? And what you're sharing with. And again, if I'm doing let's say transactional VSAM TVS, then yeah, absolutely, I can have updates going on from some application in the cloud or from my reporting tool. And that can be done concurrently with let's say kick transactions running against that same data. Certainly there's no magic in the universe. There's potential that there can be delays and that kind of thing if both sides try to update the same records. But it is high integrity, and it's guaranteed that you won't get like part of an update, or something updates 10 records, you won't see one updated record and 9 that haven't been updated yet. You'll either get all of the updates or none of the updates, depending on timing. So again, this shouldn't be surprising to mainframe folks out there. It just behaves like you would expect any sophisticated mainframe application to behave.
All right, thanks, Vince.
Yep.
Vince, I know we had a we've talked a lot about kind of the source and these JDBC targets, but we recently had a request to move like legacy reports, and I think they existed in a vsam file, and then output them into actually a PDF. So just moving them to a different off mainframe readable form. Is that something we can do with Propels as well?
Yeah, just as I described that we can take input from any source, we can also kind of pipe our output to just about any source. So, an example of that, what you just said, I might take, let's say a vsam file with some, I don't know, text reports on it. I might read that with Propels. And then instead of going directly to a database, I might insert a step there that converts those reports to, PDF in this example. And then sure, I could certainly, take those outputs and store them as blobs in a database, but I could even take over that and, use some completely different approach to store that data wherever I want it to be stored. So, if I had a, let's say a vendor product and it exposed an API that said, here's how you populate a, new report into my repository, certainly you could use Propels to do the reading and transformation and all the preparation that goes into that. But that final step, instead of being a database transaction, could be, okay, now go drive the vendor's API, and they'll deal with it. They'll put it wherever they want it to go. So yeah, the flexibility I described isn't really just on the input side, it's on the output side as well. And I mean, we're talking reports, but that also opens the door to things like, I don't know, management data. You want to use, read SMF records or console messages. I mean, all of that can be processed through Propels the way I'm describing. So it's, if your goal is to do some kind of fancy analytics on, the SMF accounting records that ZOS generates, this is a solution for that as well.
Okay, thanks, Vince. Just one other quick question before we wrap up here. So I know we bundle some drivers out of the box, even though it's an open architecture, we can plug in, any JDBC driver or even some of those other outputs that you just described. What are the ones that we kind of bundle for, they're fully tested, performance optimized? What's bundled with Propels?
Yeah, that's a great question. When right out of the box with Propels, when you first install the software, we ship 5 that are ready to go. The drivers are there, everything's configured. It's just a matter of tell us what type you want to use, and they work with zero configuration work. Those 5 are MySQL, Postgres, Oracle database, Microsoft SQL Server, and Snowflake is the 5th. Now, as you said, it's just JDBC, so it's possible to support probably 100 others. And there are really 2 models for that. Certainly if you wanted to go to, I don't know, Ingress or, fill in the blank, any other database, by all means, talk to us. We can generally provide that. And we'll be happy to do all the configuration work that would be needed for that, supply the correct JDBC driver and so forth. No need for us to do that, though. If you are comfortable with that, if you've done it 100 times for 100 other databases, you're welcome to supply your own JDBC driver. And then, there's a little bit of configuration work where you need to, tell us how to interact with that SQL target. And generally what that means is, what kind of data types do I use? If the input data type is a floating point number, what does that need to be in this particular type of database? So, again, you get control over that. You get control over things like, do I want to create indexes on my data? Do I want to create alternate index? All of that stuff is open, and it's just a matter of configuring it that way. So again, your choice. If you have unusual needs, let us know. We'll be happy to work with you on that. If you're comfortable doing it, you're welcome to do that yourself. And Propels just continues to work as we expected to there.
Yeah, and I'll just mention before we kind of wrap up here. So beyond, like the zip eligibility and some of the other savings, Propels is $50,000 per year, unlimited data. You get the drivers. Yeah, no data limits, no install limits. It's just $50,000 per year for your enterprise. So I'll highlight this in some future webinars. There's a lot of other use cases for Propels that we're going to highlight that you would get for that $50,000. And so it's an extremely cost-effective solution. I'm going to share just, if you have a more complex migration from, say, like a legacy reporting platform, we have a great partner in Ocient. And, it fully integrates their methods and services with our Propels technology to make this a turnkey solution for the customer. So please reach out to us or Ocient if you have any interest or have a need for that. And then also I'll just share a little bit. This is webinar 2 in a series of webinars. So we have some really cool topics coming up. So we'll talk about mainframe to cloud data integration, and that'll focus Propels, but in a little bit different discussion than this report migration. And that's next week. Application modernization, and that one that can really touch on all of our products, but we'll focus a lot on the LOSN, that real-time read-write, and how that can really help de-risk and speed up your modern application modernization projects. And then another Propels discussion around mainframe tape to cloud migration. So this is a really interesting pattern that we're seeing in the market and have several projects going on around this one. And we've heard this story now over quite a few times now, where the application gets moved or modernized to a cloud platform, but they have all this historical data that's on tape that needs to be maintained and moved and be accessible in the cloud. And so we'll talk through that pattern. And then another really exciting use case for Propels is unified access to mainframe management data. So that would include SMF, console messages, stuff like DB2 logs. That can be as simple as storage, or that can be actually for near real-time, or if not real-time observability off the mainframe into cloud and other SaaS applications and distributed applications you may want to integrate that data into. And I'll just mention we have instant mainframe storage with our ZAC product. That's a really cool topic as well, and that's on demand right now on our YouTube channel or at virtualz.com. There's a number of resources out there. If you want to see Propels demo in action, come to virtualzcomputing.com under Propels in the demo, or our YouTube channel. You can see how that works. That one really features getting mainframe data into Tableau, and it's about a total, Vince, I think it was about an elapsed hour of you installing Propels, getting the data into a MySQL database, and then expressing that data through Tableau. So that's a really cool demo. And like I said, we've got a number of other resources, blogs, other webinars, and all right. Thank you for joining us today. And yeah, come check us out at virtualzcomputing.com. Thank you.